Hey guys, welcome to Dragon's Voice podcast. Once again, I am your host, truly, Rhys, and alongside with me is my co-host again. It's Luke Williams. Luke, how's it going, pal?
I'm all right. How are you? Yeah, I mean, I only saw you the other day, didn't I?
I know we've been recording lots, haven't we? So,
Yeah.
for some of you guys who are not keeping up, we've actually been recording a lot of episodes recently. Me and Luke, we recorded the one about the Wrexham takeover. We were talking about one. We were talking about a few other things to do with Wales and everything. But then, before the last episode that we recorded, we were talking about what specific eras or moments we could talk about on the podcast. And I suggested the Bobby Gould era. And we're here to talk about the Bobby Gould era. Are you looking forward to that one?
I'm looking forward to the discussion. I'm not looking forward to sort of revisiting some of the moments. I mean, I wasn't alive at the time, but having read extensively about them, I
Yeah,
still get shudders hearing the name.
yeah. I was only a baby when it
Yeah.
happened. Well, he joined in '95, and he finished the job. He finished managing Wales in 1999. So I was only 3 years old when it happened.
Mm.
When it happened. So, but being football fanatics, Welsh football fans and everything, we're going to have, we're extending the research. We do a lot of research to go along with it. So, but this particular era, it just seemed to be, how you look at it, it seemed to be like a sort of dark period for Welsh football, wasn't it? The 1990s wasn't really. It started off with a glimpse of hope, and then all through the course, it just went downhill. So we got to start from the very beginning then, because it all started with Terry Yorath.
Mm-hmm.
So Terry Yorath, he started part-time for Wales because he was managing a few clubs. I think he was managing Bradford and Swansea at the time, bound back to back. But he was part-time for Wales. He led a lot of hope, went full-time, and he almost got us to the World Cup in America in 1994, but Paul Bowden's penalty, it wasn't to be. And it was afterwards that the FAW were not to renew his contract, I think, during that tournament. So regardless of whether he took us to America, I think that the 1994 World Cup may or could have been his last for Wales. But some people that I've spoken to, I've spoken to James Leyton about it. He's the author of many football novels and he was saying to me, how especially a lot of people who supported Wales or followed Wales through that period, they said that, it was a dark period for Welsh football because it wasn't only the fact that Terry Yorath was leaving as Wales manager, it was the fact that a fellow a Wales fan died during that game. He got struck by a flare, which is absolutely terrible. But then afterwards, it was left in limbo to see who was going to take over. And originally, who was it? John Toshak took over as a one game. It wasn't even a one game wonder. It was he came in and lost 3-1 to Norway. But how would you explain that sort of period at the beginning of the 1990s? It must have been a bonkers start for Wales,
Yeah, I mean, to sum it up in one word, I'd probably say turbulent. It was tricky. I mean, even for Euro '92, Wales was so close. I mean, that victory against Germany, wasn't it, that was replayed during lockdown, the 1-0 in 1991, with Ian Rush's goal at the National Stadium. Had it not been for only one team qualifying from that group, had Euro '92 not been an 8-team tournament, Wales would have definitely been there. I mean, the squad was more than good enough. The likes of Ian Rush and Barry Horn, Kevin Ratcliffe, we had so many good players. And then after that, September 1991, we beat Brazil as well, 1-0 with Dean Saunders' goal. So, just so close. It's that 4-1 defeat out in Germany, with that infamous, who was it, the player trying to cross it into his own box? I think you know the one.
Yeah.
And, is it Klinsmann latches on the end of it, and just little mistakes like that. But it was so close. And then you mentioned 1994 for the World Cup, that Paul Bowden penalty miss. I mean, I think everyone in Wales is still scarred by that, everyone who was there at the time. And obviously you mentioned the tragic circumstances in which a fan lost their life. And you sort of, it sidelines the game, really, doesn't it? It overshadows it, and rightfully so. But then following that, with Terry Yorath then moving on, him not having his contract renewed, it was in limbo. You mentioned Toshak came in for one game against Norway, and I think we had Neville Southall and Mark Hughes,
No,
wasn't it, for one?
that was after Bobby Gould.
That was after.
Yeah,
That's it.
because what happened was during that time, Mike Smith, who
Mhm.
was a regular, it was a favourite for Wales because he tried to take Wales to the European Championship in the late 70s, but failed after losing to Yugoslavia. And even then, I think we were going to mention this before we're going on to the Bobby Gould era, that the Yugoslavian game, with Wales for Yugoslavia at Ninian Park, that was an intense game because Wales went out there. I think they lost 1-0 or 2-0. But they did put on a good performance. What the reports have been, reporting back to Wales and that. But when it got back to Ninian Park, a lot of things seem to have changed. I know I'm going off topic here because I know we're supposed to be talking about Bobby Gould, but this is very quickly. But it was just the fact that the referee from East Germany, Rudi Glockner, was in charge of the game, and he was not impressed with the way that he was greeted because he wanted an East German flag flying at Ninian Park, despite the fact that East Germany was not playing. And someone said that it was because of that was the reason why he was being biased for Yugoslavia and what caused tension. And the reason why it was called the Battle of Ninian Park because of Rudi Glockner's refereeing decisions and Yugoslavia's physical performance. I'll say it's more diplomatic physical performance. Was the reason what infuriated the Wales fans. And during that time in the 70s, Wales, the Ninian Park was only the fans were kept by only steel fences, which you can normally get in like park lanes or something. They're wobbly. And some of the barbed wire was taken off anyway because the fans, whatever they smuggled in, wire cutters or something. But they invaded the pitch and tried to confront, Rudi Glockner. I mean, and it even got to the point where, they were on the pitch, the physicality, we lost out. And speaking of Terry Yorath, for me, Terry Yorath missed an important penalty, to try and get Wales back into the game. Brian Flynn knocked out one of the Yugoslavian players because I can't remember his name. It was a 6'2", 6'3" player. And keep in mind, Brian Flynn is not the tallest of the tallest players. I mean,
he's 5'2".
He's like
5'4". Yeah.
Yeah. And he was being intimidated by this player. And Brian, even though standing at 5'3", just turned around and flumped him one in the face. And that just goes to show, looks can be deceiving and everything. But going on to it, the fans invaded the pitch and tried to go after Rudi Glockner, and a Wales fan got arrested because he picked up a corner flag and tried to javel shots at Rudi Glockner. But because he was protected by the police, one of the police got impaled by this. And I don't know who it was. I think it was either John Toshak, Brian Flynn, or Terry Yorath, or maybe John Mahoney or Mahoney, how you pronounce it. But one of them stated that when it got into the changing rooms and how bad it was, he said one of them sat down and then he turned to their right, and all of a sudden they saw a police officer just covered in blood with a gash and everything, just sat there white as a ghost, just waiting to be taken by an ambulance. And I could go on about it forever, but it was really tense, but considering, one of the future Wales managers who would hopefully take us missed an important penalty. And this is why it's going back to Paul Bowden, because it seems to be a bit ironic, because Terry Yorath was the one who tried to take the penalty, miss, and Paul Bowden, who was a regular penalty taker, and nothing could go wrong, in a sense, for a Wales fan to be at a game because Paul Bowden was a regular penalty taker and 9 times out of 10 would finish. And to miss it as such a crucial game, it's become infamous for not only for the Wales fans, but for Paul Bowden himself, who has to live with that, you know, and considering he's now Wales under-21 manager. People feel sorry for him because it was such an important game, and, you know, the weight was on his shoulders for him to try and get that moment where we can qualify for the World Cup. But going off afterwards, you know, and then to have John Toshak take over. I think that was one of the reasons why when John Toshak returned to have a second spell, I think because he only made a blimp appearance and then left again to go back to Spain or something. I think that was one of the reasons why a lot of Wales players, especially the likes of Gary Speed, Ryan Giggs, a few other players, especially just refused to acknowledge or play for John Toshak because of his commitment to the Wales team. But then Mike Smith. So go on. I've been going on for about it anyway.
Well, no, I was just going to say Robbie Savage retired from international duty when Toshak was reinstated because, from what I understand, he'd been doing a lot of punditry, and so he'd had a few choice words about a certain few Wales players in the intervening years, especially in the Mark Hughes era. So then by the time he came back in, you know, a lot of the sort of older heads thought, well, we've seen what he has to say about us on telly. I'm not taking instructions from him. That's why, you know, Savage sort of infamously walked away. But that is Robbie Savage. He is prone to sort of exaggerations. He's prone to acting up. Yeah, I think also that blimp, that brief sort of one appearance you mentioned as manager also sort of compounded that feeling of sort of alienation within the pros.
Yeah, no, I agree, because if you notice it as well, it was there was an whether you call it infamous or famous debate that went on TalkSport that involved Leyton James, who he himself was, you know, he was not afraid to comment on a few things, you know, and he's the kind of man who was never afraid to open up on his opinions. But it was him and Robbie Savage that took on a very, you know, nasty bit of debate, and it's a never ending. I thought the argument was never ending. And I will never forget, I remember the first time I heard it, right? And but bear in mind, I mean, like I said, I was only a kid, and you're only a baby just coming into the world when this happened. But I remember the first time I heard it was a couple of years ago, and James Clements, and shout out to James Clements, another co-host who comes on every now and then. But he said, you've got to listen to this, Rhys. And he puts it on our way to Bangor. I think it was Barry v Bangor away. And it was just this big argument between Robbie Savage and Leyton James, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic because Leyton James didn't hold back, Robbie Savage didn't hold back, and I think the host, I can't remember his name, but he was just, you can picture it in some ways, you can picture it, just him go in, this is gold, I'm going to carry on, you know, so
when Leyton James tells him to write him a letter, Robbie Savage is, you know, it's mid-2000s, why hasn't he got a mobile phone? And Leyton James will go, what do you need a phone for?
Yeah.
Write him a letter.
Leyton James, proper Swansea boy back. But the thing is, and don't get me wrong, a lot of people, especially a lot of Cardiff City supporters, don't worry guys, we'll get on to Bobby Gould in a minute, but a lot of Cardiff City supporters grow to detest Leyton James because of his comments on the FA Cup when he really wanted Cardiff to lose to Barnsley, and because of his other opinions. But from my perspective, I met Leyton James once when he was director of football for Haverfordwest County, and this is going back a few years ago, back in 2011 and 12, and lovely gent, lovely guy. I had this picture of him, and it was when he was younger, but he had like a psychotic face, and he's pointing up. And he looked at it because he was going to sign it, and he went, bloody hell, you couldn't pick a better picture, mate. I'll tell you that. Absolute lovely guy, from my perspective, anyway. But he's the kind of man, even though I don't particularly know him well, or don't know him full stop, but he seems to be one of those guys who's got time for people who have you know, got the sense of respect or just, you know, appreciation to be in the presence of, you know, whatever. Yeah. But then again, would Bobby Gould be the same? So here we go. So Bobby Gould, we all know him as Mr. Wimbledon. Well, not Mr. Wimbledon, but he was the manager that got Wimbledon to win their first ever FA Cup. famously beat Liverpool 1-0. He's the kind of manager who takes no crap, no nonsense, and the thing is, though, it was just after when when Mike Smith left, it was then who the FAW were then struggling to find the right manager for the job, and there were four favourites. There was Brian Flynn, Wrexham manager, but I think Brian Flynn was coming to his end. It was around about the time where Brian Flynn was coming to the end of his Wrexham career, because he was there for a long time, a long time at Wrexham, and I don't blame him anyway. No, I really don't. I mean, if you're Mr. Wrexham, or if you're, if I was a former Barry Town or Everton player, I mean, I would try and stay there for as long as I can. There was him, Neville Southall and Ian Rush. They were the favourites to take over because of their sense of their top quality football at Everton and Liverpool, respectfully. So those two, I think they would have been perfect as joint managers, because, their sense of leadership and everything. The fourth favourite, and no one understands why, was Ron Atkinson.
Really?
Big Ron. Yeah, Big Ron.
Wow. I mean, reputation's somewhat sullied by a few comments he made in the early 2000s about Marcel Desailly, but, it's not our place to comment on. But, wow. As in former Man United and Coventry manager and Aston Villa. Wow. Yeah. And we ended up with Mr. Crazy Gang.
Well, here's the thing, right? When I was doing my extensive research, right, there was sometimes for you guys who are a fan or not a fan of Wales Online, when it comes to football, they tend to be a bit more truthful when it comes to football. Sometimes even though the opinions are very harsh in at times, but when you were covering Bobby Gould, they said that when they interviewed Bobby Gould, Gould said he was on holiday at the time in the West Indies, and he said he was drinking a pina colada, and he got a call from his agent or a friend and said, Wales are looking for a new manager. Now, Bobby Gould always wanted to manage international level. Problem was, a man from England, I'm not gonna be anti-English or anything like that, but it is, when you look at it from perspective, I don't know if Mike Smith was English, or he could have been Welsh, but I think he's looking it up now.
Yeah, give me 2 minutes. I've got the exact email article that you're mentioning. I've got it up here now. So he was born in Hendon, Mike Smith. Yeah, in England.
Yeah, so there was a bit of but because Mike Smith's contribution to Welsh football, where he was doing the schoolboys, he was doing the under 19s, 18s and everything, because he worked his way up, a lot of people accepted that because he did it the right way in some aspects. But with Bobby Gould, because of the success he had at Wimbledon and probably at a few other clubs, a lot of question marks were, hanging over people's heads, thinking, is this the right man for the job? And he did it so well. He said he was sat in front of a U-shaped board, and he apparently passed it with flying colours, and said, and he said the first thing he said to him was, and this is what he said. He goes, "A black man once had a dream, and now he has a dream, and this dream is about to come true." That's what he said to the FAW board.
Wow.
And then next, he gets the job, and then his first game was against Moldova, and it was a 1-0 win, and it was for Gary Speed.
Yeah.
And Gary Speed scoring the goal and everything. But I mean, but the journey, but the controversial matter, the controversy and the bumpy journey started off straight away because of Bobby Gould's, nature and ideology as a manager. Was very conflicting to some of the likes of John Hartson, Mark Hughes, Nathan Blake, even Ian Rush and Ryan Giggs, Neville Southall questioned it, despite the fact Ian Rush and Neville Southall were appointed as assistant managers or coaches under Bobby Gould. So it was a bit ironic, to say the least, to have two favourite contenders for the job, and yet they become assistant managers, under Bobby Gould, who wins the competition. but the thing is, you know, I'm just looking it up now. Just covering it. I tried to cover so much, but the journey starts off so bumpy. What have you got for Bobby Gould so far, then, Luke?
Well, I mean, the stories I've heard former pros tell about Bobby Gould, we could probably fill about 4 more podcasts. I mean, the 3 you mentioned there, Nathan Blake, Marquis John Hartson. I mean, where to begin with those 3? Nathan Blake just refused to play for him after accusing Gould of making a racist remark in training. So I think that's probably the worst.
Yeah.
I mean, objectively, that's the worst of what he did. But on the lighter side, Mark Hughes just didn't really like him, didn't get on with him, didn't like his style of football. And I mean, do you want to tell it, or shall I? The infamous John Harton wrestling story, because
Oh no,
I mean, it's fantastic.
You tell this one.
Was it John Harton's playing for Arsenal at the time? He's scoring a decent amount of goals before his move to Celtic, so he's not quite in his, you know, his full form, should I say? But Bobby Gould just seemingly despised him. He called him overweight. He just didn't think he was fit enough. He didn't think he suited his style of play. And then I think what I've heard happened from, I think Ryan Giggs and Dean Saunders have vouched for this, is that he had put John Hartson in the team. He'd said that he was starting him up front. And then the next day in training, dropped him. And so John Hartson was clearly not very happy. And we've all seen what he's like when he's upset on a training pitch. And so afterwards then, at the end of the session, Bobby Gould calls him over and says, "John, you're not happy with me? Come on." He makes all the players form a circle around them to hide them from the press and says, "Come on, wrestle me." And they just have it out there.
Oh, yeah.
Have a wrestling match there. And apparently Dean Saunders was just kicking him in the back.
That is such typical Dean Saunders, though. But I remember, yes, it was funny because just to back up on that story, you know, the whole wrestling in the circle thing, right? If you ever have a problem, he adopted that from Wimbledon. It was a crazy gang thing because...
doesn't surprise me.
Well, I'm going to mention Vinnie Jones in a minute because that's a story of its own. But the thing is, the likes of Vinnie Jones, John Fashanu, David Sanchez... I gotta try and remember some of these, but there's a lot of names of the crazy gang, but they because they were all tied together, but they're not afraid to speak up. Bobby Gould said, "Right, how can I get them to respect me? How can I just say, right, if you got a problem or if you got a problem, let's have it out." And that's what he did. He there was 1 or 2 players. I mean, you got to watch it on the Crazy Gang documentary on BT. It was absolutely spot on, but it was just the fact that Bobby Gould said, "I created this wrestling, fighting it out kind of motive just to let off a few steams and then shake hands afterwards." But he tried to adopt some of that with Wales. It kind of made sense because John Harton is a former Wimbledon Crazy Gang player afterwards, so it doesn't really. It doesn't really surprise me that someone like him would do that. But I remember reading the article. It was another one. And they said when John Hartson was on top of Bobby Gould and everything, and Dean Saunders kicking Bobby Gould's back and that, all you saw in the background, or not far away from the muck, was just Ian Rush and Neville Southall, and I think one more player, just arms folded going, "Jesus Christ above." And the fact is, it's just the fact that Ryan Giggs, Gary Speed, Mark Hughes, and Barry Horn and all them lots, they were just all going, "Come on, Harty boy, just knock him out, knock him out." And but I would have done the exact same. But apparently, it did do wonders because Bobby was like, "Fair enough, you kicked my ass," and he let him back in the squad. But there was just the. It's just there was a lot of ruckus going around the area, but it was just the fact that his style and ideology is what questioned a lot of players, especially when for training session matches or preseason friendly matches, he would pick the most obscure opponents for Wales to compete against, especially for the Welsh press. The Welsh press 11, 2 days before a game against Germany. And I can't pronounce his name. Is it Paul Aberdonato or
Yeah, Bondonato. Yeah, that one at
Bondonato.
Wales Online.
Yeah, and if I just go, he said they compete at Cardiff Arms Park, and he said, I presume the players had been told we were the opposition, but as we trudged down towards pitch side in our kit, there was a look of bewilderment for most of them. Still, one or two saw it as an opportunity for quote unquote revenge for some of the headlines written about them by London tabloid journalists. Right from the kickoff, Dean Saunders went over the top on the man from the Sun, John Richardson. Look at this, streamed Rico, as he gazed at the wounds on his shin. You make sure you write about this assault in the Western Mail tomorrow. Dino just smiled.
Well, I think the funniest thing about that is that the performances in that match influenced the team selection for the Germany game, which is such a backwards way of looking at it. That if if you don't score against a bunch of journalists when you're at probably about 10% capacity because you're just having a laugh, that decides whether you're playing on the international stage or not. And I think you mentioned the crazy gang ideology he tried to adopt. I think that's sort of crucial to his failure because you can't really do that on an international scale, can you? Because you're just simply not there. You're not around each other enough. It works at club level because you're there day in, day out. You're training, or you're in the dressing room with them. You're playing with them, so you get that sort of close knit togetherness. But on international duty, unless you've come through, the age ranges like you see with the Wales players now, you're just not going to have that sort of synergy. Yeah, and so when you've got your manager offering out players for wrestling matches, admittedly on the club training ground, that could be quite endearing. But I suppose on a national level, you would sort of think, well, hold on a minute, is he the right man for the job?
Because here's the thing, though, with the Wales players as well. I remember having a conversation with Kevin Ratcliffe about this, and Kevin Ratcliffe said the reason he said something down the line of the reason why Wales did not succeed or go through as much to the World Cup stages or anything is because the players did not stick together through the youth ranks. They didn't come up together. They all came in from different leagues, from Premier League to Championship to, I don't know, Bundesliga to Spanish leagues and everything. Whereas, in today's, I think the most brilliant way to have done it, whoever came up with it, whether it was John Tosher, Gary Speed or Chris Coleman, whoever it was, but someone was genius enough to go, right, let's get them all together.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why it didn't glue together as much. And that's why you can never, ever, you can try and bring a club football vibe. Like I was saying, you can try and bring the club vibe to the football. But that only works if you've grown up with each other, or you can try and do that in some aspects. But as well with the Wales team back in the mid-90s, that just did not happen at all because you've got some veteran players who have been there and done that. And then you got some young talents who were just coming in and just, they felt like, some of them felt like a fish out of water because they were just happy to have been there, play for Wales. I spoke to Ryan Green, who became the youngest Wales player to be called up. And that infuriated Ryan Giggs because he held the record that time, and it infuriated him. And he had a falling out with Bobby Gould because of that. And someone said down the line of, why Ryan Giggs said, no one remembers Ryan Green because where's he been? He's been at Hereford and non-league. Look at me, I'm Manchester United. And I thought, I'll just shut up. But and going on to the Welsh press, it was just a nice little exercise for the players just to get back at it was a revenge match because the tabloid journalism was trying to get at them. However, 3 other pre-season friendly matches that they had over the course of Bobby Gould's reign as manager, we got to talk about. There was one against Leyton Orient.
Yeah, I was waiting for that to come up.
Cwmbran Town, and there was another Welsh League team. I think it was either Rill or someone else. But the infamous ones have been Cwmbran Town and Leyton Orient. I'll talk about the Cwmbran Town one before we go on to the Leyton Orient one. So I don't know if it was before or after the Leyton Orient game, but Bobby Gould, in all fairness to him, Bobby Gould has always had a huge respect for Welsh League football. He always wanted to push Welsh League football, and that was one of the biggest pros that came out of the Bobby Gould era, was because he wanted the League of Wales to be presented as a proper professional side, to be worth something, and he tried his best to call up a few players. He did with Gary Lloyd, who was playing for Barry Town at the time. And I remember speaking with Gary Lloyd during one of the podcasts for the Yellow and Blue Army podcast shows I did. And he said to me that one day they finished training at Jenner Park, and Gary Barnett just came over to him and said, "Oh, Bobby Gould's on the phone to you." And he thought he was pulling his leg. And he was like, "No, it's not Bobby Gould. No. And he was like, just get on the phone." "Oh, it's not." And he said to me that he was just, he said, "No, it's not Bobby Gould, whatever." And he picked up the phone and went, "Oh, you've been called for Wales. This is Bobby Gould. Do you want to come play for Wales?" And he just went, "Holy shit, it's Bobby Gould." and he went off to play for Wales, but he didn't. He went off to play for Wales against Belgium. He was on the bench, but he never made the cut, which is, I think it's a bit of a shame, really, because Gary Lloyd would have been the first, even though he's the first ever Welsh League player to be called up for Wales, but he would have been the first ever Welsh League player who was a full international, you know. So that was a bit of a disappointment.
I think my favourite sort of aspect of Bobby Gould trying to boost the League of Wales reputation is getting Princess Diana, Lady Diana Spencer, the Princess of Wales, to attend the Welsh Cup final between Barry Town and Llansanfraid.
Yeah,
I mean, you've got to respect that, haven't you?
Oh no, you got to respect it, because this was around about the time, it was in 1996, or it was 1996. So this was the year I was born, and he tried to get it, and Diana Spencer apparently turned around and said, "Oh, thanks, but no thank you," you know. And and in all fairness, that would have been amazing publicity for the Welsh Cup and League of Wales. But I think it was I think I was very happy that Gary Lloyd got the call up, and he actually, believe it or not, during his time in Belgium with the likes of Dean Saunders, Ryan Giggs, and etc., a lot of these high key players had a lot of respect for Gary. He said, "You've come a long way. Fair play to you," you know, and he treated him with a lot of respect and a lot of with royalty. So I saw fair play, but that's just the kind of man Gary Lloyd is. He's just a nice guy. And but then we got to go on to the Leyton Orient game.
I mean, do we have to? I'd rather not. So they finished, wasn't it 90th in the overall Football League table, or 88th? They missed out on relegation from the entire Football League by about 2 places. And so obviously, when you're booking it in, you think, yeah, this is going to be easy. I like Ryan Giggs, Dean Saunders place, and the bloke who scored the winner, I forget his name, but he didn't even play for Leyton Orient. He was on a trial. It was his second week at the club. I mean, if anything doesn't sum up the Bobby Gould era more, is losing 2-1 to Leyton Orient. I mean, come on.
Leyton Orient at the time were in 3rd division, weren't they? They were in 3rd
Fourth.
division.
They were.
Fourth.
Oh yeah. They were League 2 nowadays.
They were in the barrel.
Just about to be. I think they stayed up by. I think what might have happened is another team had points docked for financial misconduct or something, and so they just managed to stay up. I think off the top of my head, it was something ridiculous like that. But they were so close to being relegated from the entire Football League pyramid, and Wales managed to lose to them.
I just looked into it, and it's on YouTube. You can literally watch the entire game on YouTube, and it's just embarrassing to watch it, because you had Neville Southall, you had Dean Saunders, you had Mark Hughes, you had Ryan Giggs, you had Barry Horn, you had first team players. They literally went out with a first team squad. That would never happen in today's football. If Leyton Orient of today were to play Wales of today, Bale, Ramsey, Joe Allen, Joe Roden,
No, we've
Dan,
got some very good players.
yeah, Dan James, most of them, Harry Wilson, David Brooks, most of these players would never have played. They would have probably played the likes of Josh Sheehan, Tom King, maybe
Yeah.
Chris Gunter to get that experience going. They would have tried to, they would probably have called up some championship or 30-year-old
Yeah.
players just to play that game.
Yeah, like the Trinidad and Tobago friendly at the race course last year when he had, I think Will Volk made his debut, Ben Woodburn got the winner, and
Yeah,
Ryan Hedges and that were called up. Yeah, you would have, I'm not going to say like scraping the barrel, but you would have sort of, fringe players, so to speak, to come in. I mean, you wouldn't play the big hitters.
yeah,
And the names you mentioned that certainly would not be getting a run out.
no,
And the idea of them playing it is odd enough. That's something else. But then to lose it I'm looking now, 89th in the Football League. So they were 21st. That was their lowest ever finish. They'd also gone out with 3 cup competitions in the first round that season. I mean, they really were at a low ebb. And then to beat Wales, it's just, I suppose it says a lot about how far Wales has come as a footballing nation and the fantastic work the FAW's done. But that's a different podcast,
yeah,
isn't it? This is Bobby Gould
yeah.
being a bad manager.
And what made it even worse for Bobby Gould as a manager was the fact that in the first half he was there, and in the second half he wasn't. He wanted to go watch his son in a cup final or something, so he left all the managerial role. He left the duties to Neville Southall, who was playing in goal. He left it all to him to lose to a Division 4 team. He went to go and see his son and watch his son in the cup final.
No, sorry, I've got to shoot off. I can only do the first half. Bear in mind, he's not.
Can you just see Ryan Giggs doing it? Actually, in all fairness, I would actually see Ryan Giggs do that. I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to go and try and make up with my brother Rodri. He's playing in a cup final.
Wayne, can you just look after this lad?
Wayne, yeah, go for it. Bobby, just help him out. Pale, Gareth, come to sort him out. Oh my God. Do you know what? I have to admit, I just go every time I think of it, it's abysmal. But I do think, what a bloke he was, just a magic manager. It's just the fact that I went to go and mention, because we just had a few problems with the podcast, and it's going to be a lot of editing in this now. But it's just the fact that when Wales played against Cwmbran and they beat him 6-1, the audacity of Bobby Gould to replace Gary Speed and put himself on and scored the sixth goal of the game, it just makes it even more surreal.
50 years old, born in England, no connection to Wales through lineage or anything. So he goes, I'll sub myself on, score from a Ryan Giggs cross.
Did he get? I want to know. I mean, don't get me wrong. I always wanted Bobby Gould to come on the show, right? And just want to know the important question: did he get a cap out of it? That's what I want to know.
He's got one from, oddly enough, he's got one from the Wales women in 95, 96, and it's like one of his prized possessions.
Yeah.
Apparently, he would round up the likes of Ryan Giggs and Dean Saunders and Ian Rush, the big hitters, and he'd sit them down and he'd just show them on a loop videos of him scoring goals when he was playing in the 70s, and he'd just show them the videos, and not even in a coaching way, just go, look at that, that's how to score. Ian Rush, he was the highest scorer in the League Cup of all time. He's Wales' second highest goal scorer, was the highest at the time. And, Bobby Gould has the temerity to sit him down and say, "Here you are, son. This is, this is how you score."
Right. You tell them to take down notes here. Go on. You're the assistant manager. Go on. Big Nev, you do the same.
Yeah, subbing himself on when he's not even well.
This is amazing. What really stood out for it is just the fact that we're going to mention Robbie Savage in a minute, but I remember we got to mention this one particular player. Like I said, I did say we were going to mention, was none other than Vinnie Jones. Vinnie Jones has the only Welsh connection he has was I think his grandfather on
Yeah,
his
I'm
father
just
on his father's side. I
yeah.
really
Born in Watford. Yeah, Welsh grandparents.
he
Yeah,
had Welsh grandparents, did he?
yeah.
Oh,
Or well, one of them. Yeah, but born in
well,
Watford.
but he's supposed to be like a Cockney bloke. He's a Cockney bloke, and he's playing for Wales. In all fairness, he did give it a go. I will give him the old fairness. But if you look at his track record for Wales, I think it was 7 or 8 caps for Wales. None of them were wins.
9 caps, never won.
9 caps and never won. And the fact is, he went to. There was a lot of problems when they were going into Holland as well in Eindhoven, and at the time, a lot of players just dropped out. Ryan Giggs said, "I ain't going." Mark Hughes said, "I ain't going." Barry Horn said, "All right, then I'll captain for the team," and then mysteriously picked up a stomach bug on the day. So you had players, I think Dean Saunders, Vinnie Jones, and there was another. I don't know. Big Nev, obviously, he was in goals, but they all
He got man of the match, didn't he?
Who got man of the match?
Is this the 7-1 in
The
Eindhoven?
7-1.
Yeah, despite conceding 7, Neville Southall got man of the match in that game. I think that says it all about him. I mean, you look at the names of the scorers. Dennis Bergkamp got a hat-trick. I mean, he needs no introduction. Ronald de Boer as well, Wim Jonk, Frank de Boer, and Philip Cocu, who's just been sacked as Derby manager, all on the score sheet. And Neville Southall in goal got man of the match. Dean Saunders did get the sort of consolation goal for Wales, but I think that says it all really about how under the cosh we were.
Yeah. And the thing is as well about Bobby Gould's record with that game particularly, it was one of the pivotal moments of what set off a lot of explosions, let's just say that, for Wales, because I remember interviewing Lee Jones, a former Wrexham player, and he got called up twice for Wales. And one of them happened to be, unfortunately, the Wales v Eindhoven game. And he said that, and I asked him, and you can look it up on the Dragon Stories podcast, and he was saying to me, you know, everyone was calm. Everyone sort of, I think the players sort of knew that it wasn't going to be a walk in the park because Holland were on top of their game. They had the best of the best players. They were the unstoppable force, you know, and for some, I don't know if they ever won the World Cup, hey ho, but you know, they had Bergkamp. You had some of the top quality players. But I remember watching, Vinnie Jones. He was doing an interview, an evening thing, and he said that when Bergkamp scored the seventh goal, even Neville Southall was like, "Flimming like he outdone me," and some of the players had to just clap and everything. And Vinnie Jones was saying he was voted as captain, you know, he learned the Welsh national anthem by heart, you know, nothing went right. Nothing just went all thumbs up for him that day. And even Lee Jones said that, you know, they weren't too disheartened because they weren't surprised, because they said, even Lee Jones said, if it wasn't for Neville Southall, they would have lost 10-0, 13-0, 20-0 or something like that because of because of the way Netherlands just took them to town, you know.
Yeah, I'm just looking now. It wasn't all negative with Bobby Gould. I mean, this is admittedly the only silver lining in this whole podcast. The rest will be negative. He had a win ratio of 29%. He played 24 games. He won 7, drew 4, and lost 13. Now, surprisingly enough, his win ratio 29%. He 27%, and yet his time as Wales manager is, I wouldn't necessarily say remembered fondly, but certainly more fondly than Bobby Gould.
Yeah,
but
Mark
I suppose
Hughes.
It's 27%. And obviously we beat Italy 2-1 under Mark Hughes. You know, that sort of launched his career as a manager. I think he's in the top 10 of managers who's managed the most Premier League clubs. So, you know, he's had a successful career, and I think he's got an OBE, Mark Hughes. But, you know, for Bobby Gould to outdo you on win ratio percentage, that's,
But if you look
I
at
think that's saying something.
if you look at the win ratio for Mark Hughes, if you look back on his stint as Wales manager, most of the games have been draws. That's the reason why his win ratio is not as tough, because even though a few tournaments or a few games, or I remember, I think it was 2002 or 2003, Wales went unbeaten for a year for most of the games, but that was mostly because Mark Hughes' team just kept drawing all the time, and especially with Bobby Gould, you know, there was just disastrous losses, you know, and you know, whether it be proper friendlies or competitions and everything. But going back on, you know, the Eindhoven game and the way they just viciously lost 7-1. It just goes without saying the reason why there's a lot of people, you know, who really despise Bobby Gould. And it's just, wait a minute, it was just, wait a minute, I think someone said, Bobby Gould said, in hindsight, what I should have done was make my own decision, not put it to the players. I'd have gone for Vincent too, by the way. He played under me at Wimbledon. We had a rapport or whatever it said, you know, and just going on to, but it's like when I was looking at the articles, they're saying without Neville Southall, the Wales team would have just fell to pieces. Literally would have fell to pieces. And what made it even worse, though, was that later on within the year, there was an article in the Western Mail, Turkey at Christmas, but stuffing in November, when Wales lost 7-4 to Turkey. And oh no, 6-4, sorry, 6-4. You know, Wales were down 2-0 before coming back 3-2, but then in the second half, they went up by 4-3, and then all of a sudden, the goals just kept coming in.
Was it Hakan Şükür scored 4 that day? Yeah. I mean, wow. And if we're talking about, because you mentioned there that the sort of famous players' vote of captain in which Vinnie Jones won, but I've heard a few pros at the time, or ex-pros now, say that afterwards they went round the room after it was announced and they said, you know, did you vote Vinnie Jones? No. Did you vote for Vinnie Jones? No. Basically, the conspiracy is, if you want to brand it that Bobby Gould had his mindset on that anyway. It was just about inclusion. It was about giving the players this sort of false sense of, oh, they've got the power here. Because apparently, maybe 1 or 2 voted for Vinnie Jones, from what I've heard, and yet he ended up with the captaincy.
But oh my God. But moving on from worst results ever to one of the weirdest ways of training. Now, normally, Wales would train at their training facilities is at the Vale Hotel. We all know that. That's one of their main key training facilities. But for Bobby Gould, just to change it, and he took advice from the FAW, to which one of the FAW board members suggested that in order to get prepared for the €2,000 qualifiers, they go to HM Prison, Prescoed in Usk, Monmouthshire. Usk Prison.
The open prison. They also trained in a primary school, and I'm not sure if you've heard this. Do you know what makes it even better about the Wales team training in a prison? They once left Bobby Gould there, and he got locked in the prison. I mean, whether that was for crimes towards Welsh football, who knows? But
it's a criminal against Welsh football. He deserved to be there.
I think a few of the Welsh team actually said, "Don't turn around, just leave him there."
Yeah, just go.
Yeah. You made them train at a primary school as well, just on the playing field. An unorthodox approach, isn't it? And
well,
I mean,
no, go on. Sorry.
No, go on. You go. Your podcast.
No, it was just he said it's just happened to the likes of Ryan Giggs, Neville Southall, Mark Hughes, and the rest were all training at prison facilities, right? And then Bobby Gould is quoted saying the players actually loved it. The prison, the prison had much better grass than anything else they were accustomed to with Wales at the time. Back then, I was taking a bit of a battering from the Welsh media. Well, I'm not really surprised.
I wonder why.
And he goes, I'm going to have them, I thought. They won't get out of this place. It's a prison. Of course it's not going to be easy. It was my way of having a laugh with the media, making it clear they don't control everything with the Welsh team. Now, I mean, Bobby Savage says it the most because he was very outspoken about it. And even though the likes of Craig Bellamy and Robbie Savage were the protégés of Bobby Gould, because if it wasn't for him, that's another positive, those two would have never probably been called up for Wales. Or maybe they have under Mark Hughes, but not with the most caps or anything. But what do you make of that Usk Prison?
Just hilarious. There's no words. Is there the fact that they then forgot him, left him there? And I think it's perfect that you mentioned Robbie Savage, because he's another sort of pivotal figure in an issue with Bobby Gould. It was in the sort of the build up towards. I'm sure you would have heard this story. I think this then links in also to what we were saying earlier about Leyton James with Robbie Savage's sort of track record. It was in the run up to Wales versus Italy. Robbie Savage, I think, was playing at Crewe at the time, and he did a little piece for Sky Sports where him and a journalist, they were sort of comparing. They were saying, Maldini's the Rolls Royce of football, and Robbie Savage is like a fourth Capri or something like that. He was saying, the sort of division between them, and the reporter jokingly said, "Oh, go on, Robbie, why don't you throw Paolo Maldini's shirt in a hedge, or don't you throw it in a bush as a sort of closing shot?" He did it. Apparently then, Bobby Gould rang him up. They're in the team hotel in Liverpool, I think, because it was when they were playing at Anfield. And he rang him up and he said, into my room now at 4:00 in the morning. And he said, I've just seen this. It is disgraceful. And he sent him home. He dropped him from the squad on the day of the game. He sent him home and said, I'm not having that. I'm not tolerating that. And then when the players found out, which would have been about 8:00 in the morning, they woke up, they were down for breakfast, they were livid. And they basically said, we're not playing unless you bring him back. So in this time, Robbie Savage has driven home to his parents' house and has said, look, I've been kicked out of the squad. I threw Paolo Maldini's shirt in a hedge on Sky Sports and I've been kicked out of the squad. And then immediately gets home and his dad's saying, that's stupid, whatever. Then I think Gary Speed would have been, or Bobby Gould rings him up and says, come on, you're back. And all the players have just said, look, we need him back. He's a good player. You can't throw him out or something like that. So he came back and he was just sat on the bench.
Apparently, if it wasn't for Gary Speed, actually, because Gary Speed was the one who led the rebound, the revolt. Of course, you have Neville Southall and Mark Hughes and everything, but it was actually because Gary Speed was captain. He was just coming into as captain. He was the one who said, well, we all turn about. He just said to Bobby, you will get him back. Otherwise, I'm going to tell the boys we're not playing. So screw you. We're not. And that just goes to show how much of a character Gary Speed is. He is the definition of what Wales stands for, together stronger. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we have the saying, because he is the definition of that. And Gary Speed, even though a lot of tributes have flooded in when he passed away and that to say that no one can say a bad word about him, but he had a falling out with Bobby Gould. And even Bobby Gould, when he said nothing, he couldn't say a bad word about Gary Speed because he was right. He was a leader. He was cunning. He was Mr. Wales. He led a prime example. But it just goes to show what Bobby Gould respected with Gary, and aside from John Toshak, who just didn't. And that's why Gary Speed, when he retired, it was because of John Toshak. But again, that's for another podcast. Yeah. But here's the thing. You love your music, don't you? I think,
do. I know exactly where this is going.
Manic Street Preachers, the most beautiful band ever. Brilliant band. one of the things that I really want to say about say about the Manic Street Preachers is that one of their concerts in Cardiff, I think it was at Cardiff Castle, wasn't it?
And Bute
And
Park, I think, yeah.
oh, was it? And what happened was the song "Everything Must Go." The Wales fans and Manic Street Preachers changed the lyrics to "Bobby Gould Must Go," and this was around about the time where Richie Edwards had disappeared for quite some time now, and Bobby Gould just came out and took offense to it and said that oh, they're a disgrace, they're nothing, and even went so far as to say something about Richie Edwards, about his disappearance. And that really cheesed off the band, especially Nicky Wire.
Nicky Wire hated him. Yeah.
Oh, he couldn't stand it. It's like, here we go. It's like, this is what I put on. It was like frustration was mounted on top for Bobby Gould, especially with the players. The fans had their fair share. To sit in the stands and watch abysmal football matches can lead to many showing their anger. Major supporters of Wales would constantly send in their fan articles to major newspapers, which would be covered in most of the pages in bold black and white writing. The media alone added more fuel to the fire, where the journalists, even though majority of the Welsh press played a game with Gould's international side, sharpened their words as they described Gould as a clown, muppet, a man out of touch, and stated he had lost the plot. One way of the fans showed their frustration was through the concert gig where everything was Gould, blah, 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 blah. But Bobby Gould was unimpressed with the criticism. However, things started to get ugly when the manager began to criticize Richie Edwards, calling him a bad role model. Ironically, the year Bobby Gould was appointed manager in the summer was the same year Manic Street Preachers band member disappeared in early 1995.
Yeah. I think my favourite aspect of the Manics versus Gould dispute is that the band clubbed together and James Dean Bradfield actually wrote to the FAW and said, I will give you, I think the sum of 20 grand to sack him. They said, we want Southall and Rush in charge. He said, I've got the money. Here it is. Will you, that'll cover it. That'll be the severance pay. And, they didn't take that offer. But still, it's not often you get that where they're actively, apparently they said that Nicky Wire has said that when James Dean Bradfield changed it to Bobby Gould Must Go, he said they've never had a reaction like it for any song. The cheer that went up in Bute Park, I think it was a Radio 1 gig or something, and he said that just the cheer that went up, everyone was just agreeing with it. They were just saying, yes, he needs to go.
Well, here's the thing, Luke, just reading this now, and this is where it gets absolutely bonkers, right? Now, Nicky Wire said he pledged to financially support the FAW if they hired Terry Venables as manager in response to Gould's comments by saying, my only problem with Bobby Gould is I thought he was really out of order having a go at Richie. I don't think it's very laudable to have a go at somebody who can't defend themselves. I've supported Wales since I was very, very young. I was going to home internationals when Bobby Gould still had dreams of playing for England. So I don't feel there's anything wrong if I want to criticize the manager. Everybody else does it, but I still want Wales to win every single match with passion. And rightfully so, because what did Manic Street Preachers do? They released a brilliant album, Come On Wales, for the Euro 2016.
Yeah, Together Strong,
Yeah, Together Stronger. And there's nothing, we can, nothing much we can say about that. But it shows how influential Manic Street Preachers are with the FAW, especially with Welsh football, how very influential they are. And it just goes to show how important Manic Street Preachers are to not just the football in Wales, but just to Wales in general. Yeah. So for Bobby Gould just to try and come up and say, oh, they're a disgrace and everything, you're smacking the face of the Welsh people, basically, because that's what Manic Street Preachers stand for, is Wales. So, oh, man. We still got
I'm just glad he's gone. Really, not Richie Edwards. I've got to make that clear. That could be misinterpreted. Bobby Gould, his reign of terror has been over for quite some time now. We've had stability, you know, qualify for back-to-back European Championships, something that seemed not even a pipe dream when he was in charge. That was, you know, that was out of the ordinary. That was out of the question.
Yeah,
really.
It was out of the question ever since Terry Orff left.
Yeah.
Even when Mark Hughes took over, it was just a thing that it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And
it was that Russia playoff.
Yeah. And especially as well, because the last game because we're nearly done here anyway, but the last game that Bobby Gould took charge was against Italy and they lost 4-0. And even then, when Italy lost 4-0, Bobby Gould just said to the players, bye, I'm done. I'm literally done. But the thing is there's more bad than good. I can see why Bobby Gould took the job, but he should have had a conscience back then and just turned around. He should have just turned around and said, it's not going to go end. It's not going to end well. It's not going to be for me. They should have gone with Neville Southall and Ian Rush. And to be perfectly honest, even if Wales didn't qualify for anything under Southall or Rush, at least there's some decent respect towards those two players because where they came from. And when Mark Hughes took over, you know, on permanent after being caretaker with Neville Southall, which he ended up being a caretaker manager anyway. But when he took over, I mean, he had his almost chances, but he didn't succeed. You know, I mean, we didn't get to see that dream come until when Chris Coleman took over, you know, and he carried the dream for Gary Speed, and that's what happened. But how would you describe Bobby Gould's time at Wales?
Tumultuous, if I want to get very fancy. Up and down, if I want to be a bit more sort of layman's terms. It was a tough one. I'm just glad I wasn't there to experience it, because I'm a very passionate Wales fan. I get very excited at the football. And, you know, were I there with some of the shock results, had I been, I probably would have gone to Leyton Orient. And, you know, I would have been inconsolable for probably weeks after that. So I suppose all you can do is laugh and say, you know, don't cry. No, actually, that's a positive thing. It's happened. I think we've got to acknowledge it. It's a dark period in what is a colourful history of Welsh football, but we wouldn't have had Craig Bellamy without it. So
we wouldn't have had Robbie Savage. We wouldn't
exactly.
And his intentions, his intentions were genuine, but I think the intentions did more damage than good, in the sense that he tried to expand Welsh football by getting the League of Wales to be more respectful, which I'll give him credit. I will give him credit. I'll give him respect for that. He gave us Craig Bellamy, Robbie Savage. He gave us some quality players, or tried to get some quality players in. But like I said, it's going to be one of those moments where who was the worst manager, Bobby Gould or John Toshak, you know, because the hatred between those two were there. It makes it worse because John Toshak is Welsh and he was a superstar in his heyday. But to be a manager who's come from Real Madrid, who's come from Real Sociedad and other clubs, but still, you know. But I think it was after when Bobby Gould had left Wales, it didn't take him long to actually come back and manage Cardiff City for a brief moment. You know, only brief, but I mean, I think the damage has already been done, because even then I've spoken to a few Cardiff City supporters and they said that when he came to Cardiff, a lot of people thought, oh no, get out. And in the end, in all fairness, he did. So I think that's just I know we've probably missed out a few more, but I know your time is precious at the moment. So but that's just the Bobby Gould story. We'll probably cover a bit more in the future, but we got a lot more to go through. So how does it feel to actually cover a piece of history so far?
I'm glad we got out of the way. I think in future lines up John Toshak. Then maybe, who knows, the final instalment of the trilogy, who actually was the worst manager. Yeah. I mean, there's pros and cons for both, isn't there? But who ultimately left the more damage on Welsh football? Yeah. I think the next one for us will be John Toshak, but I think the third one, we're not gonna say who was the worst one. We're gonna say who was the good one. We're going to talk about Euro 2016 because we got stories for that. And I know for a fact you and I have got plans to actually go and watch Wales away.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and do whatever. So the future's looking positive for us for the Dragon Stories podcast as well, because, you know, being both hosts and everything. But for now, that was the Bobby Gould era and what it stood for. I mean, if you think we've missed out a few things, because I know, like I said, we've had a few technical difficulties so far in the podcast, and because Luke's timing is precious. But if you feel like we've missed out something, please leave a comment below and just say, just let us know what we've missed out, because we're amateurs.
Speak for yourself.
Oh yeah.
Award nominated over here.
See this?
Yeah, you'll have to edit that out.
Yeah. No. It's not Brew Radio.
I was going to say, that's the 3 p.m. on a Saturday brain kicking in there.
Yeah, but hey, I watched the recent show though, between you and James, and it was a bit of a little titter-tatter going on there, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. But guys, thank you so much. This has been the Bobby Gould Era episode. We have been your hosts truly. My name is Rhys. This has been Luke Williams, and we'll see you all very soon. Take care.